Well, I got some thoughts. I guess the first thing I wanted to say was that there is no... We good?
Yeah, this one just needed to be restarted.
Okay. There is no... Maybe with the exception of like chemistry and mathematics, and even them, I might want to argue differently, but there is no education, there is no information that you receive that doesn't come through a cultural delivery mechanism. Any information you take in, anything somebody shares with you, automatically comes in a wrapped up in, they say like a brand is a promise wrapped in an experience. You heard that before? I mean, some recent branding guru said it. I don't know when it's from, but your brand is your promise wrapped in an experience. So, like if you watch an Apple commercial, for instance. I mean, I don't watch Apple commercials all the time, but I have seen them. They'll have like a picture of Gandhi and a picture of Martin Luther King, and then Eleanor Roosevelt, and then maybe like Geronimo and Albert Einstein, and then there'll be like an Apple logo at the end of that. And that's it. That's the commercial. They don't even necessarily show you the computer. That's not required. You just need to see that little Apple icon. But the commercial is all these phenomenal people who've done phenomenal things, who are outside the box, who are outside the box thinkers. And if you buy an Apple computer, no one in India likes iPhones. No one in India likes Apple computers. You know why? I mean, people in India buy all sorts of expensive stuff. You know, India is a burgeoning economy. I mean, there's so much wealth in India. Like our temples in India are our richest temples in the world. It's because they don't get a great value for your money. You follow? Like you can buy a Samsung or whatever and get way better value for your money. Isn't it, Raj Kamud? You feel like that? Yep. And so somehow we bought into this idea, the brand of Apple, but people in India are just too shrewd. So like, okay, what's my memory? What's the megapixels on the computer? How long does the battery last? How much do they want? I can get that for half the price. You also get these chargers, these car chargers in India, like these hacked car chargers. You can charge any phone. It's like a Hydra. It's got the little thing that plugs in to the USB port, and it's got 10 cords coming off of it, and it can charge any phone on the planet except for your iPhone. It's just a bad value for your money. It just isn't worth it. And so, anyway, in this country, this rugged individualist country of free-thinking people and anti-familism, familism is the belief that you primarily, fundamentally are a member of a tribe and that your individual existence is secondary. Such a thing is almost blasphemous in this country. Like if you talk to an Indian person, even today, what to speak of 30 years ago when I first went to India, India, Africa, take your pick, any old world culture, most of Asia for that matter. Like in a lot of senses, anywhere but Western Europe and the U.S. and places intensely influenced by them. And somebody, like, when they get married or whatever they do, the good of their family is a factor in that equation. It's very common to meet somebody in India. I was going to marry this person, but then my parents said it'd be better if I married them, so I married them. And we've been married 40 years, and we have, 8 kids and 20 grandkids. It's super common. They even have a saying. It says, in India, in the West, you marry the person you love. You ready for it? In India, you love the person you marry. Zing. Uses love as a verb, It's dynamic. You can create love. You can engineer love by loving the person you marry. Instead of just marrying the person you love, and then when that love fades, you're out. Divorce rate in India? 1%. When I was living in India, 30 years ago, divorce rate in India was 0.1 of 1%. Compared to the U.S., 50 on number 1, 65 on number 2, 75 on number 3. And people even go big and make prenups. Like, you're going to make a lifelong commitment to somebody, till death do us part, for richer or poor, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. And then before you make a lifelong promise, you sign a paper in case you want a boogie on that lifelong promise you're about to make. It sounds stupid when you look at it. If you look at, like, I'm an equal opportunity hater. If you were an alien, you came to this planet, and you met a Christian, it would be like, okay, so let me get this straight. You worship God dying, and you wear a talisman of the instrument, the sacrificial altar that your version of God died on. That's what you wear as a talisman around your neck. And then you ritually cannibalize and consume the body of your deity on a daily basis. That's the Eucharist, the transubstantiation, the communion ceremony where you eat the wafer and drink the wine. They tell you, this is the body of Christ, this is the blood of Christ. I saw you sent it to me, right? But I've been saying that for decades. That dude got that from me. Whoever that comedian was, he bit my material. I've been saying this for decades, like better than he did, isn't it? Yeah. So, what was his name? Yeah, I wasn't very. Huh? He got canceled? Yeah. Good. Sucker. Stealing my material. Serves him right. That's why I did. I engineered that, man. That was me behind the scenes. Yeah, if you were an alien, you came down this planet, and somebody's tried to describe Christianity to you, it would be like, what are you talking about? Like, that's really, you got some kind of like heavy, like blood fascination. It's like a real death cult. You're like real, like a big like death fetish going on. You're really into blood and wounds and violence, and it's like super masochistic. And you've got this whole cannibal thing going on, like really integrally woven into your scene. You follow? So I also think if aliens came down here, they'd be like, well, you're signing a prenup before you take your lifelong vow? It doesn't make any sense. But within our milieu, within our culture, it makes sense. Because we're all rugged individualists. We want to boldly go where no man has gone before. I did it my way or the highway. Question authority. We have all sorts of little slogans that wind up on bumper stickers that epitomize our value system. From a survival point of view, it's not a good value system. Sacrifice for the good of the tribe is a way better survival mentality. Just for like just straight Darwinian economics, you're better off taking one for the team, jumping on the grenade, and being selfless, just from a hardcore Darwinian point of view. You guys following this? Anyway, within our universe it makes sense because we should do whatever makes us feel good. And when our feelings about something change, then our ethics and morals are also okay to change. You follow this? Deontology was the rage for, thousands of years. Duty-based ethics. Do the right thing, no matter how it feels. Immanuel Kant said, I like it when doing the right thing is painful because I know I'm not doing it for the wrong reason. Did you follow that? Like, my daughter's in love with Atulia. All week long. It's like I'm coming to see Atulia. She's over you. I know, it's just, she's a cruel toddler, isn't she? Yeah. I mean, actually, really, in a lot of ways, we have deified and romanticized what's normally associated with early childhood development as a philosophy of life. Like my daughter will be like, I love you, Daddy. And then if I don't let her watch YouTube for longer, she's just like hates me. She doesn't actually say that to me. She'll in the not too distant future, she'll start saying that kind of stuff. I hate you. You've all said that to your parents. Unless you're raised in an old world culture, then you would never say that to your parents. You ever told your parents you hate them? No. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to you. No. Right? Have you ever yelled at your father? How old are you? How old are you now? Don't mumble at me. How old are you? You ever yell at your mom? 28 years old. He's yelled at his dad once, and probably that means he raised his voice to his father. Given how he mumbles like a pro, probably means like I raised my voice. It's probably like, I am not happy with that. That's probably what that amounted to. His parents were probably like, don't you yell at me. And he's like, I'm sorry. Huh? Yeah, maybe 3 decibels louder than that. Anyway, even if you scream bloody murder at your dad one time in your 28 years and never at your mom, you beat everybody in this room. Unless you grew up without a father, in which case you were yelling at father figures. So, yeah, like a child, a toddler, a 3-year-old, if you give them a lollipop, they love you. You take their lollipop away, or if they drop their lollipop, all of a sudden they hate you. It's brutal. Right? Nayika's like a cruel mistress, isn't it? She'll she's just like, I'm playing with her now. It's just, right? There's no, even attempt at social graces. She's just, if she wants to, she'll treat you like you are her sun and moon. And if she doesn't like you, she'll just totally shun you. Like you don't even exist. That's totally normal if you're 3. In a lot of ways, adulthood is the ability to operate with executive function, with restraint, based on higher values, and not just according to the whims of your senses, moment to moment. Impulse control. A la the marshmallow experience is associated with all good things. But executive function, impulse control, the ability to focus, the ability to work hard, pay attention, all that kind of stuff is associated with adulthood. It's what happens when you grow up and you stop being a child. Deontology, duty-based ethic, you do the right thing, whether it's easy or not, was all the rage forever. Virtue-based ethics were all the rage forever. Nowadays, most people are closeted or overt utilitarianists, if they even know what they're doing. But if you dig in, that's what people do. They do what feels good, what gets them what they want. And they invent an ethic around that, which can change. And if there's some sort of what do I want to say? What's the word I'm looking for? It's not cognitive dissonance. Is it cognitive dissonance? What am I looking for?
I don't know what the rest of your sentences.
What's the meat paradox?
Yeah, cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, there's some cognitive dissonance because the values you had last week don't meet up with the values you need to have today to get what you want. You just forget. Don't get into it. Dumb yourself down. Stupefy yourself. And don't let that uncomfortable feeling, that malaise, that spanner in the works, you just don't let it live too much. You press it down. Usually with drugs, alcohol, or sex, some other addictive behavior. Or you just watch TV or forget about it or think, it's just not so important. You guys follow me? It's like the ends justifies the means, hardcore hedonic utilitarianism. What gives you pleasure? That mentality is totally appropriate for a child, for a young child, not even for an 8-year-old. And really the move to adulthood is the move beyond that. If you look at developmental psychology, children sort of play in each other's vicinity, and they don't really have any sense that other person is particularly important, separate from what they do for you in the moment. Then when you get a little older, around 6 or 7, you start to look for fairness and equal exchange, where you put in so much into the relationship and the other person puts in the relationship. I remember my son Shekhar famously said at the age of 7, he goes, I told him, if you want to have a friend, you got to be a friend. Like when he was shining somebody, ghosting on somebody, that was what he spoke to him. Because it's when kids form, secret pacts and blood oaths and secret societies where you have to behave properly, and it's all about fairness. At a certain point, when you become an adult, around the age of 12 or 13, and you develop the ability to have adult friendships, the marker of an adult friendship is you put into the relationship, and you don't care you don't care about what you get out of it. You find happiness in seeing the other person happy. That capacity for selflessness on some level is associated with adult friendships. It's like, in the beginning, it's totally narcissistic. If my daughter at the age of 3.5 was a full-fledged adult and she behaved the way she does, you would diagnose her, right? That would be her diagnostic, right?
Yeah.
For sure, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. NPD. 3-year-olds have narcissistic personality disorder, and we call it being a child. If you perpetuate that into adulthood, you're a danger to society. Children have a low capacity for empathy. My daughter will hit me. She did this to my wife yesterday. She hit my wife with a sword in the face. And my wife went, ow, you hit me in the face. Not like a real sword. My wife's not sitting there with a gash, whatever. A fake sword. She whacked my wife with a fake sword. My wife went, ow! And my daughter started crying. I'm like, Roddy, pick her up. Tell her it's okay. I was like, it's okay, Nayaka. Because my wife said, ow, when Nayaka thought it would be a cool idea to go and whack her mom in the face with a sword. And that's cool. That works. Again, if you're 3. I think most of us have romanticized narcissism. We call it rugged individualism. We write songs and poems about it. And we think it's manifest destiny. If you're familiar with American history, and it's the pioneering spirit, and it's being honest with yourself and finding your bliss and speaking your truth and being authentic. Which oftentimes is just what somebody says before they betray your trust, break their commitments, abuse you, exploit you, etc., etc., etc. You guys follow me? I think if you took an objective person who wasn't raised in our groupthink bubble and you showed them the way most people live their lives in the U.S., they would be like, wow, all these people are like professional narcissists. Do you follow me? And surprisingly, and I've got all sorts of hate to throw on people from all different countries of the world, so like I said, I'm an equal opportunity hater. But if you were to go to Africa, or if you were to go to India, or go to China, you're in a whole, it's like a different planet where people make decisions based on what's good for their family and are happy with that. Sometimes sometimes we get into this and we buy like 7th generation laundry detergent. That's how we show what great people we are. Based on, the whatever, an old Indian saying, we don't know if an Indian person actually said it or not, Native American person actually said it, that in every decision you make, you should think about the impact on 7 generations of your children. I'm like, who does that? My grandmother's from Serbia, born in Serbia, and then moved here when she was young. My grandfather's from Serbia too. And so my grandmother worked tirelessly up until her 80s, lived frugally, saved tons of money, well over $1 million. Working not like a big job, like just a regular old job, Gave it all to my mom before she died. Lived to give money to my mother, to our family. Lived to do it. Without question, without asking. Had no money left by the time she died, gave everything while she was alive, like The Giving Tree. The Giving Tree, you know that book? By Seth Silverstein. You know the book? Raise your hand if you know the book. Most of you know the book. It's about a tree and a boy. Tree gives the boy fruits, then gives the boy its branches so he can build a house, and eventually, actually gives the boy the whole being. Cuts him down and then builds a house out of him. And at the end of his life, the boy's an old man and he sits on the tree stump. And so it's a book about the friendship between a tree and a boy, and it's about giving. Trees, which give shade on a sunny day, which give fruits, and which also give shelter in the form of the wood which is used to construct houses, and which tolerates the elements without complaining. Trees are oftentimes in old world narratives, they're symbols of tolerance and this giving spirit without asking for anything in return. That's the big thing, the selflessness of the tree. There's a whole movement that Seth Silverstein wrote a terrible book. It programs kids to be codependent and to, get into abusive relationships with narcissistic people who exploit you. I don't think that critique is terrible. Actually, when I reread the book after reading the critique, I was like, geez. He left himself open for that one. But you can see, like when I grew up, and the book was probably written in the 60s or 50s. When I grew up, that book was must reading. If you're like a white progressive liberal kid with woke parents in the 60s or 70s, you like read that book. That book was choice reading material. And so, but the world's changed, even just since my childhood. People don't do that. Give all their money to their children while they're still alive, live frugally their whole life. My aunt was a spinster. You know what a spinster is? It's an archaic term for an unmarried woman who never marries, who lives without a mate for her whole life. And so my aunt, my great aunt, was a spinster. She never got married. She did the same thing my grandmother did and gave all the money to our family too, because that was her niece. Did the same thing. It was just normal. Nowadays you hear it, you're like, whoa, like who are those people? But that used to be normal. Anyway, you go other places of the world and you talk to people, you find that when they make life decisions, career arcs, where they live, what they're going to do, their family is like a big deal. Taking care of their family is a big deal. You guys got that, right? You won't in a couple generations. The U.S. is excellent at bleeding the culture out of people. Like, I don't speak Serbian. Vam je oca i sina svatba doja. I can say a few things. Go wash your guzi and your pupak, which means your butt and your belly button. I can say stuff like that. But but I don't speak Serbian. And so within a couple of generations, people are no longer learning their native tongue. Usually it's like 2 generations. Like, I doubt your children will grow up speaking Spanish. You're like, I'm going to do it. We'll see.
I was just going to say, teach them Spanish.
We'll see. We'll see. Anyway, you were born in Mexico. So even you do teach them Spanish, you still don't get any credit. The question is whether they're going to teach their kids Spanish. You follow? And usually the way it works is your kid will grow up understanding Spanish, but they won't speak it. They'll hear you speak in Spanish and they'll speak back to you in English. Because they'll think Spanish is lame. And this is like, we're in Southern California, which is like El Patio de Mexico. Like, we're right here. Like, you know what I mean? Like 40% of our population is Spanish, Mexican, Latinx, whatever. Like 40% of our population is Spanish speaking. I speak Spanish. And I'm like, I'm not from Mexico. I mean, it's normal here. It's like being from like Switzerland and speaking German. It's like, it's not that big of a deal, you know? But yeah, what your kids are going to do, what they're going to do if you move to like Colorado or something like that, and then we'll see. We bleed it out of people. We're really good at teaching people our cultural message. So much so that we don't even question it. How many times have you guys questioned the preposterousness of prenuptial agreements? Raise your hand if you have. Oh, you guys are all special. But most of you weren't born in the U.S. Or you've been hanging out with me and you heard me say it and you just forgot, making it your own. If you take yourself out of our bubble, so many of our mores and values and ethics are extremely selfish. You guys following this? And so, there is no message you'll receive, no information you'll ever get from anywhere that doesn't come in a cultural medium. And so when you get the message, you're also getting the culture where that message grew up. So even now, I'm speaking in English. That automatically binds what I'm speaking to the English language. Generally, if you have a significant enough or a detailed enough conversation about our theology, you have no choice but to, at the very least, use a glossary of terms. In Sanskrit, there are no English equivalents. If you have a detailed enough conversation about our theology, you have no choice but to extensively use a large glossary of highly specialized philosophical terms which were developed over thousands of years in India and which still in 2021 have no equivalents in English. You guys know some of these terms. Think about the term dharma. And it's just, duty, religion, intrinsic quality, fundamental cognitive behavioral faculties, truth, justice, righteousness, honor. That's all wrapped up in the single word. Dharma. All languages are like that. They have words which, freedom in the U.S. That term is practically speaking religious in this country. It's not just a word. It's not to just mean what it means everywhere else in the world. For us, it's like, I'm going to die for that. Give me freedom or give me death. It goes back to before the American Revolutionary War. It's there in that thing from Benjamin Franklin, that early thing. Like the Boston Tea Party days, So, even giving a message in a language binds you to the culture of that language. So anyway, I wanted to introduce that, and then I wanted to read this to you. This was written by Srila Prabhupada before he came to the U.S. from India. He would have written this in the late 50s / early 60s, before he got on a boat and came to the U.S. And Prabhupada was not a native English speaker. But man, did he have a cool command of the English language, which you're about to see. We must know the present need of human society. We must know the present need of human society. What a great opener for a speech, right? There's so many things I could get into with this. But anyway, we must know the present need of human society. And what is that need? Rhetorical question. Human society is no longer bounded by geographical limits to particular countries or communities. Human society is broader than in the Middle Ages, and the world tendency is towards one state or one human society. The ideals of spiritual communism. Did you guys follow this? It's pretty good stuff, right? This was Prabhupada pre-civil rights movement in India, which had just broken free from British rule. The ideals of spiritual communism, according to Srimad Bhagavatam, the text that he's writing an introduction for, are based more or less on the oneness of the entire human society, nay, of the entire energy of living beings. He throws in nay. Who does that, right? It's like a 7 years ago, right? Isn't it? It's like an I had a dream, right? Are based more or less on the oneness of the entire human society, nay, of the entire energy of living beings. So he starts off with human beings, because you're speaking in language, and only human beings have recursion in language, the ability to give sophisticated ideas like this. Recursion is, I'm going to the store with my friend to buy some vegan ice cream for the party tonight down the street, where you take one idea and you stack it with another idea, and you become very specific on what you're communicating. Animals don't do that. And so what Prabhupada's writing here is something of a philosophical treatise. So it's natural he's directing towards human beings, but he doesn't stay there for very long. He throws in animal rights like 5 seconds in. Nay, of the entire energy of living beings. The need is felt by great thinkers to make this a successful ideology. The need is felt by great thinkers to make this a successful ideology. The idea of finding oneness in human society amongst all living beings. Great thinkers appreciate the importance of this idea. Srimad Bhagavatam will fill this need in human society. It begins, therefore, with the aphorism of Vedanta philosophy, Jamadi Yasya Yataha, to establish the ideal of a common cause. Jamadi Yasya Yataha means that we're going to talk about. I don't want to get into this too much, but I'll just give you guys like a quick 2-minute tutorial. Sutra literature took place a few thousand years ago in India when they took entire ideologies and philosophies and they codified them into simple, easy-to-remember mnemonic devices called sutras, which means threads. And those threads would be memorized. And those threads, so there's 570 in the Vedanta Sutra, that's our sutras. And so these threads are memorized, and then you learn an entire philosophy over many decades. But those simple aphorisms that you learn, which are extremely terse grammatical constructs, devoid of any unnecessary language, they acted as stimuli, which would then help to remind you of an entire philosophy that you'd learned, that you could then carry it around with you and walk around with it. And by remembering those simple, easy to remember, aphorisms is the correct word in English, but these simple, easy to remember one-liners, you would then be able to remember all the teachings of your gurus for many, many decades, and eventually that meant for many, many thousands of years, because they were just getting stacked on top of one another. Just like when you learn how to become a neurobrain surgeon, you're not just learning 12 years of information. You're learning thousands of years of information, which has been distilled by a community so that you can pick it up in 12 years, because they pack thousands of years of trial and error into a very, very small, millions of years of trial and error, all the people who are involved in it, into a very, very small package with an expert, with expertise and distillation and an amazing delivery device, so that you can learn how to operate on somebody's brain in 12, 14 years. Do you guys follow that? That's what aphorisms are doing for people. And so there's this, they start off kind of in a formulaic way. Atato Dharma Jigyasa was the first one. Now inquire about Dharma. Then Atta Yoga Anushashanam. Now inquire about yoga. That's the Yoga Sutras. Start off with Atta Yoga Anushasana. Now instruction on yoga. The Mimamsa Sutras, the predecessors of ours, Atato Dharma Jigyasa. Now inquire about Dharma. Ours starts off with Atato. Atta means right now. Inquire about Brahman, about spirit. And then spirit's defined. What's spirit? Jamadi Yasya Yataha. That spirit is that thing from which everything comes. Therefore, the monism of our tradition is that everything has a common cause, and therefore everything is connected. Do you guys follow this? If you want to connect with somebody, you have to find points of connection, common interests, common language. Like when I was in India, when I was living in India, sometimes I'd meet Western people who were out in the middle of nowhere for whatever reason. I was living out in the middle of nowhere, but sometimes you get some tourist, some dirty hippie would be out there in the middle of nowhere. And like I said, I'm happy to hate. And so some dirty hippie would be out there. And, I'm like shaving head, saffron robes, doing my thing. I don't want to wrap it down with some hippie that hasn't taken a bath in 8 days. I'm not feeling it. But as soon as they would see me, they'd be going, oh my God, because they see another white person or another non-Indian person. You follow? I could have been black. They would still have been into me. But they found another non-Indian person. They were like, they're my best friend all of a sudden. Because we're in an area where there's no Western people. It's all Indians. Like every time I go take a bath, the whole village would come out and watch me bathe. Like I'm out in the middle of nowhere pulling buckets out at 4 o'clock in the morning. There's hundreds of villagers watching me bathe, like pointing at me, talking about me, gawking at me. We're super good at bathing without disrobing. It's the whole thing. We use very thin towels that we wrap around ourselves. Short, thin towels that we wrap around ourselves. Then we can drop our underwear, wash our underwear, but we still haven't exposed ourselves. And then you take your full bath with that thin towel on, so you're soaping up and doing everything with a thin towel on you. So you're in public. People are watching you, but you're not disrobed. And then when you finish, you fully rinse off, but the material's thin enough that the water rinses that material off as well. You follow? You can even, if you're super slick, you can wash the towel you're wearing somewhat while you're wearing it. Like, you know what I mean? Without disrobing yourself. Then you take your new towel, wrap that around you, drop the old towel, give it a final rinse, hang that up, and you're good to go, fully cleansed without ever disrobing yourself. Do you guys follow that? So anyway, just in case you guys, ever living in a village out in the middle of nowhere, it's a little more difficult for ladies. It's a little more difficult for ladies because you got to cover a larger portion of your body. Yeah, they just want to hang with me. But like if I saw them on the street in London or in Orange County, there wouldn't be that automatic, intense, immediate, super intimate, you're my best friend forever connection. The circumstances created that. You follow? So in any given circumstance, you need to figure out what you have in common with somebody in order to bind with them. It might be a similar philosophy of life, or you like the way each other look. It could be anything. But there's got to be something, some connection. So Prabhupada introduces a connector that connects everybody for all time, including all different species of life together, namely that we all come from the same monistic source, that there's a single source for all existence. Do you follow this? So he's making the point that the Bhagavatam espouses this ideal, and therefore it actually, practically speaking, does have a way to find a common thread through all society, human and animal. It's not just we say that, but we actually have an idea embedded within our teachings, embedded within our culture, that makes that a possibility. We say all men are created equal, which, nowadays means all men and women are created equally, and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. So the basis is that all people are created equal. What's the evidence all people are created equal? What are you saying? You evil bigot. There is none, right? How tall are you? I'm 6'1". Are we equal in terms of height? We are not. In terms of melanin in our skin that gives you a natural resistance to sunburn, are you and I equal? We're not. You're better off than me. You follow? How about in terms of eyesight, Mr. Four Eyes? Are we equal? We are not equal. I have 20/10 vision from distance. My vision, I have presbytopia, so my close-up vision is not as good as it used to be. So I went, Soza, Tadeo, took me to go see an optometrist, and was going to get me some contacts or look at LASIK or whatever. I really didn't want to wear contacts. We were thinking about maybe doing a shine job on my eyes so I didn't have to deal with it. And they tested my eyesight, and the optometrist freaked out because they couldn't test my eyesight. He said he'd tested the eyesight of 20,000 people. He'd never found was somebody with distance vision as good as mine. And I was like 45. I had 20/10 vision from distance. You follow? I guess just 20/10 vision, because I was 20 feet. I could see what somebody else could see at 10 feet. And he couldn't test it. We had to go and do he didn't have it. His software didn't go up that high. So we actually had to do a physical test where he started stepping further and further back with a chart and then measuring how far it was. And I was like, whatever, man, I'll deal with this, but I like that. I like being able to see from distance. I like that eagle eye. So I just figured I'd live with the presbytopia, the failing eyesight close up. Now I just take my iPhone, my overpriced iPhone, and make everything as big as possible, and I'm good. Yeah, our eyesight isn't equal. How about intelligence levels? We all equal in terms of intelligence? How about if we start to get into real intelligence, all the different types of intelligence, like with the Howard Gardner real intelligence? Are we all equal on all the different facets of intelligence? Logical and spatial. Where's the equality? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equally. How is it self-evident? How is it self-evident? It's not self-evident. It's the opposite of self-evident. Self-evidently, we're all different. Self-evident means immediately, discernible, incorrigible, could not help but be true, demonstrable. How do we demonstrate equality amongst humans? Throw animals into the mix and try to do that. But you don't even need to do that. You can't even demonstrate equality with humans. Right? So how do they where do they get the nerve to come up with that? Prabhupada isn't just saying everybody's equal. That's what everybody says. He's trying to flesh out and abstract the idea that we all come from the same creator, and therefore in that sense we're all created by God, and in that sense there's a commonality between us, there's an equality between us. He's actually trying to structure an argument for it. Now it's not like he solved every possible objection you could have. We'd have to work with this argument. We'd have to talk about you not being the body, and there being a source, what that source would be called. There'd be a bunch of steps you'd have to go through if someone wanted to give you trouble on this, but he's at least trying to give you some evidence. You follow? Human society at the present moment is not in the darkness of oblivion. It's made rapid progress in the field of material comforts, education, and economic development throughout the entire world. See what Prabhupada's doing there? He's stealing the thunder. He's anticipating an argument that somebody might be like, hey, we're better off than ever. We just cured polio. We're making computers. We got 5G. And he's saying, yeah, we've done amazing stuff. But there is a pinprick somewhere in the social body at large. But there is a pinprick somewhere in the social body at large. Who is this guy? It's so poetic, right? It's so forceful. This was Prabhupada, top of his game, in his 60s, living in a village somewhere with no money. Prabhupada was living in a village with no money, completely destitute. The U.S. hates Indian people. Historically, the U.S. hates Indian people. Because right around the same time that Chinese people were coming and working super cheap, building our railroads and also doing other menial labor, they were kind of pre-Mexicans. Right around the same time, Indians also came to this country in large numbers. And they became loggers. You looked this up after I talked about it? Yeah. And you're like, Jesus, 2 Chrome is actually correct, right? They became loggers in the Pacific Northwest. And they moved to Washington and Oregon and Northern California. And they were loggers. specifically Punjabi, Pashtunis, what are called Pathans in India, kind of big, tall, manly Indian folk from, sort of, really, it's like actually, it's modern day Pakistan and Afghanistan when all of that was part of India. And white people got sick of brown people stealing their jobs, and so they passed an anti-immigration act that was up until 1965. And there was just a few tens of thousands of Indians in this country up until that time. Now there's 3 million Indians in the country. But in some places they make up a huge percentage of the population. But back then it was a few tens of thousands of people. And it was a fraction, 3%, even if you scale the numbers, how our country's grown in terms of our population to that time, it was like a couple of percent. So we have hundreds, like 100 times more Indian people in this country, percentage-wise, than we used to have in 1964. So Prabhupada wrote all this before there was any chance of him even coming to the U.S. He was penniless, stuck in India, and he was thinking these big thoughts. But there's a pinprick somewhere in the social body at large. And therefore there are large-scale quarrels even over less important issues. There is need of a clue as to how humanity can become one in peace, friendship, and posterity with a common cause. There's a need of a clue. Srimad Bhagavatam will fill this need. He's really making a case. It's beautiful. From a literary point of view, it's beautiful. From a rhetorical point of view, it's beautiful. He's structuring really good arguments. Extremely clean thinking. Srimad Bhagavatam will fill this need, for it is a cultural presentation for the re-spiritualization of the entire human society. That's the line. For it is a cultural presentation for the re-spiritualization of the entire human society. That was it. That's the line I wanted to read. When you look at a culture, you got to figure out, what is the, I don't know, operating system on which that culture runs. What are the unstated premises that fuel that culture? What are the implicit values that are never questioned by the people in that culture, but just assumed as the only way to look at the world? And when I think about rugged individualism in the West and hedonic utilitarianism and this striving to achieve personal happiness as the most important feature of life, I think it's this idea that's that somehow or other you're the only person that matters. It's almost solipsistic. You're the only person that matters. It's extreme narcissism, philosophical narcissism. It's an ideology. It's a value system. And so we have a different value system. That's our culture. We might have some, Indian arts and crafts and stuff like that we do. And we have our version of Aesop's fables called Panchatantra, and we have, different jokes that we tell and different stuff like that, a different cuisine, different spices that we like to use. There's all sorts of things like that might differentiate some of the less important details of our tradition. But the real essence of our culture is this idea that life, human life specifically, is for developing spirituality. Human life is for spirituality. We are not like the other animals. We have huge brains compared to the rest of our body. I know it might sound like I'm hating on the frogs, but they got big tongues. They're really good at catching flies. I'm not trying to claim that I'm as good of a fly catcher as a frog. And I'm not trying to claim I'm as good of a meat eater as a tiger. With its short digestive tract, so it gets the protein out of meat before the toxins come out, and its actual canines instead of just fake teeth. They're called canines that can rip flesh from bone, and claws. When you look at human beings, we suck from a survival point of view. We have to wear clothes and live in buildings and have heating and air conditioning and have refrigerators and cook our food and eat with utensils. We don't have enough hair on our bodies. Our nails are like a joke. We have the teeth of an herbivore. We have the teeth of a cow. You take a look at an actual omnivore, like a bear. Bears get 5 to 10% of their caloric intake from meat. They're an omnivore, and not like a big omnivore like 50-50. They're like a small omnivore. You take a look at a bear's fixed jaw, the amount of pressure it can generate in a bite per square inch, and the size of its teeth. We're like a joke. We have this. See that? That's for chewing cud, dude. You follow? That side to side, that makes our jaw so weak. So weak. So you look at our body, and we suck. But we're apex predators. We're the king of the jungle. We're apex predators. We're so powerful we can destroy the planet. We're the weakest, and we're apex predators. Why? Because we have huge brains. We're able to think like nobody's business. And so just looking at our anatomy, the purpose of human life is to think deeply. And if you think deeply enough, you start to think about spiritual topics, the big questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What's the purpose of life? And the Bhagavatam is about finding positive answers to those questions. Not to the exclusion of other texts. We're cool with other texts, no problem. That doesn't mean we can't critique stuff if you say something nonsensical. But it's not exclusivism. It's pluralistic. And so I was walking in and I thought, this would be a cool thing to talk about. You get a sense of who Prabhupada was. You get a sense of Prabhupada as an ambassador, as a cultural ambassador. And culture isn't being used in the way that we normally think of culture, as music and song and dance, although we have all that. But on the deeper level, the deeper stratum of culture that we're trying to present is just a different way of thinking about the world, a different value system, a different premise that motivates our whole tradition in all of its movements. And when you take our value system, that life is about something bigger than yourself, that you should be a part of something bigger than yourself, that you should find something glorious and meaningful to dedicate your life to, and you should cultivate selfless love and service. When I take a look at that value system and I compare it to the individualistic, exclusivistic, narcissistic, hedonistic, utilitarianist, unstated premise that most people have running underneath their software as their operating system, I'm like, I want to hang out with these people. This is my tribe. Okay. I think I'm done. That's right. Wow. Within 1 minute. Thank you very much on IGTV. You can hang out for a sec, go, Paul.